And I remember messaging my dad and I said, I think I just made the most important video of my life so far.
What do you think now is a responsibility of not only influencers, but everyone on social media?
How many times have I tried to understand why it is that they feel so justified? You don't question because you don't want to be targeted.
Yeah.
This is strong enough for people who are not Palestinian, not Arab, to be speaking up. So
why are a lot of people hesitant to post? Especially influencers. Is there what's the negative backlash that you guys are seeing?
That's a really good question. And I think, this is why you need to do your research and see why are they saying what they're saying? Why do they believe what they believe? Why is it tied to religion? And should it be, if you don't start on October 7th, which you should not start on October 7th, you'll realize that I'm not more qualified than anyone else to make these conclusions.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your informational videos.
It's something that's different now as opposed to years ago, or even 2 years ago with Sheikh Jarrah, or last year with Shireen Abu Akleh. People want this information now more than ever. They're angry, especially in the US.
Yeah.
Any kind of government, any kind of company, corporate, whatever, has tried to smush the will of the people. It's never worked. It's never worked. The people always find another way. This is what gives me so much hope.
Testing 1, 2, 3. You're tuned in to Up and Coming, the pod where we discuss everything that is up and coming with your girl, Kiran Fatima.
Celine Safadi. So before we get into it, can we get an introduction?
Yeah, of course. My name is Celine. I'm 25 years old. I've lived a little bit everywhere. So I was born and raised in Paris to a Syrian mom and a Lebanese baba. Moved to Dubai for a year just for my senior year of high school. Then I went to UCLA and I got my business degree at Parsons. And I moved back here where I started a creative hub called the Neighborhood Studio. So I did work a little bit in marketing, PR, branding kind of companies, a year in fintech, tried a little bit of everything, but decided, ultimately having a creative hub and a creative space is what I want to do. So I'm working on that right now.
That's exciting. And thank you for coming on the podcast and welcome to Up and Coming. Because today's topic, it's a tricky one because if we misstep in any words, there's significant backlash. You're also an influencer on social media, super popular. I'd say Dubai's favorite.
What?
Yeah, you're my favorite. So I hope the other ones are
blush.
No, you're the cutest.
Thank you.
But with that being said, I want to preface the conversation. We are both not experts in this. We are not experts in international relations. But do we have to be? I just feel like for far too long, people have remained hesitant to talk about Palestine and everything that's going on because they're scared to be labeled anti-Semitic or any other words that are coming out. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let's just get into it. Western media, the mass media outlets, everything that you've been seeing, how do you feel about the way that they've been covering everything that's going on?
Well, first I'll start off by saying it's nothing new. This is what we've always seen, I grew up in France, obviously, like I mentioned, and spent some time in LA, spent some time in New York. It would receive almost no coverage if you were to ask me. I think, the more I made more and more American friends, they would speak to me having zero knowledge on the topic. And the only reason it would come up was because it was something that I was passionate about and I would keep up with, and I follow certain people on Instagram who are always posting when things are flaring up again, or just generally always posting. I discovered this when I was in 8th grade. I discovered what's going on in Palestine. And because my mom actually was always a boycott person. Yeah. So she would lose her mind when I would go to Starbucks. And I'm like, wow, what's the big deal?
It's not that deep.
What do you mean? How on earth? What a conspiracy theory, It's not, as we now know, as common knowledge, right? They are, they support Zionism. And the boycott, the BDS movement in general, is the best way for the people to sort of show their support of the Palestinian cause. So I vividly remember so many occasions in the US, where it would come up. And I had friends, Jewish friends, any kind of American friend, right? Who would ask me okay, but what is the situation? I'm like, you know what? Where do I start? Let me just pull up my favorite videos that have been created on this topic. And they weren't always social media videos. At the time, Jon Stewart was the host of The Daily Show. He actually said quite a lot of things about Israel and Palestine that were obviously framed as anti-Semitic when they came out, and it was really, really controversial. And he's a Jew, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't make any sense to Western media, and they actually got wiped off the internet. Like, I remember trying to
crazy.
find these videos like 3-4 years ago, and I couldn't find. I found everything except for one.
Yeah.
Which yeah. But the point is here is that there's a ton of online resources, but when the media doesn't talk about it or highlight it like they do with everything else, it just doesn't seem like something that should be on your mind.
Yeah.
So the Western media plays a huge role in the fact that so many people were uneducated up until today.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I feel like because we grew up with like the CNN and BBCs and believing them, if anything, I would consider media from my country, if anything, I'd be like, which is Pakistan, I'd be like, they're so extra in certain things. Like they'll add melodies to like events that don't need to be added. But like this time around, I feel like we've all been very cognizant of the way that they're covering it because we know both sides. A lot of videos, and I want to talk about the influencer aspect. The linguistic hypocrisy that they're showing and the way that they're framing words. And I'm sure you have like a lot to say about that.
Died versus killed, murdered versus,
It's depressing. And like, if anything, the way they're not saying the word genocide. And they're using softer terms, unfortunately, which are like war or invasion, ground invasion. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
And it's sad. And like you said, it's the reason that everyone's been so uneducated till now. But you are an Arab. Do you feel like in the media, there has been an active campaign always to make Arabs seem psychopathic,
Oh, yeah.
extremist?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like you see it in Hollywood. And I'm someone who almost didn't know where they belonged for so long in my life because I grew up in Paris. Like I said, like some people would call me French. I don't consider myself French at all. You know, my dad, again, he's Lebanese. My mom is Syrian, but I never lived there. So it was always almost, challenge with my identity, especially because I was born with the American passport is another thing. So if you look at just the paperwork, right, I am Western, like I'm French, I'm American. But if you look at, me and who I am and my cultures and my values, like my bloodline, then you'll see, I'm Arab, I'm white passing for sure. And I acknowledge that privilege all of the time. And no one would ever look at me and think I'm Muslim. If you saw the looks people gave me when I said I'm Muslim, they're like, huh? Why? Because Hollywood, the media, everybody portrays anyone who's not white. Like, I mean, let's venture off of just Arabs for a second. Anyone who's non-white as being a terrorist. Like anyone with an accent, anyone with you cannot ignore the villainization of non-white people in Hollywood. It's just madness. Yeah.
And we're seeing that now in the news with the people in Gaza being like these terrorists. What other words are they using? Like
human shields.
Their kids, if anything, they're being compared to animals. Yeah. The babies are terrorists. The babies deserve to be killed. So it's sad.
The dehumanization, in their language is so apparent. And, for so long, people didn't bat an eye because they're like, okay, yeah, I mean, that is us versus them, It's this powerful play that Israel consistently uses of this is us and that is them. And any sort of propagandist or any kind of cult mentality will always portray an us versus a them. And that's why it's so polarizing right now, because it's like, okay, are you us or are you them? Yeah. And that's it. There's no nuance. There's no, I want peace for everyone and these things. And there's truth in that. And there's an extreme polarization in that, So it's difficult to navigate around. And this is why, when you get into social media and stuff, that's the only difference between now and before is that people are able to pick up the phone and talk. But, social media has existed for over a decade, right? So why hasn't anyone said anything before? It's because of this whole us versus them rhetoric that's been spread, since day one.
Absolutely. And coming into social media, so your videos are typically different. You post whatever you post. I'm not going to get into it. But now you've been recently, ever since everything started, you've been posting a lot of not only stories of pro-Palestine, but educational videos about what's going on. What made you start that? That's literally not even on brand, if I would say. Yeah. Yeah. What started that?
You know, it came to the point where I would always post on my stories all the info and news that I could come up with, and or that I came across, and I would think about the fact that, you know, I would write a lot on those stories. I started to get messages from people in the US and in France and, you know, non-Arabs that were coming to me and saying, you know, thank you so much for posting, and like, can I please repost what you wrote, because I couldn't say it the way you say it, things like that. And I'm just like, okay, you know, but not everybody cares enough to pause the video or pause the story and like sit and read everything, and maybe they don't know how to piece it together, maybe they just don't bother with it, you know. So when I came across, you know, one night I was sitting with my uncle and my family, and we were all talking about this because, you know, we know the history. My dad grew up in Lebanon when Israel invaded Lebanon. Like, let's keep that in mind. He really has a first-hand experience of, you know, their genocidal intent, right? So we're talking about it, and my uncle talks to me, he's like, did you hear about this canal? You know, if you look into that, then you'll know a big chunk of what's happening. Not everything, obviously, there's a lot more, but you'll know a very interesting geopolitical agenda that might be in place. So I was like, what is he talking about? Like, now that he put it in my mind, I need to know, you know, and maybe that's just something for me. Like, when I don't know about something, I go and I research, I go and I educate myself, you know, and I make it a point, and I get into these holes of like, you know, academic journals and, you know, different research websites, because I went to research heavy schools, right? So I know how to parse through those things. So I did the research, and I was like, whoa, like, people need to know about this, and it's too much to write in a story. So I was like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible. I knew a few things going into it. I knew I wasn't talking about every single detail that needed to be talked about. I knew there was so much more to the story. I knew I was never going to do it justice for anyone that was going to watch the video, but I also knew that I was going to make a difference. You know, I filmed that video. I did the research. I wrote my notes, and I filmed the video, and I edited it all in the same day. And I remember messaging my dad, and I said, I think I just made the most important video of my life so far, because this is going to open the eyes of so many. And even though it's only 1%, you know, it'll maybe, hopefully, make people dig and make people look more. And check my facts, please. Please go do your own research. Don't just believe me because I said it, you know? As credible as I may be to people from the schools I went to or how I speak or whatever, go look it up yourself. Like, I'm more than happy. Like, I encourage that, you know? So yeah.
No, I'm super proud of you for doing that. And I kind of want to, and that's kind of the reason I wanted to get you on here, because this genocide, everything that's been going on, there's obviously the ground portion that's happening. And then there's just a whole sphere on social media. And if I would say there's a social media war going on, because we see Israel on effing TikTok and Twitter and everything. So now more than ever, where influencers were maybe always dubbed as like, you know, stay in your lane and focus on the makeup or the fashion or whatever you're doing, every word counts. You made a video. What do you think now is a responsibility of not only influencers, but everyone on social media for like, is it making an impact? What are we supposed to be doing?
First and foremost, I think a lot of people laid back and they were just wanting to see who came out and who said what, you know, before they picked their stance. And I think that is the completely wrong way to go about these things. I mean, I agree. And I think it's positive that, you know, one person's testimonial will influence someone else to go and make their own opinion, but that's exactly what it should do. Influence you to go do your own research and get your own opinion on the matter based on your independently collected information. And you can take into account people's different accounts on social media. I think it's completely legitimate. But when you read a fact, before you spew it out, and before you say things that, you know, just that you're regurgitating from somebody else, go fact check it. Like, there are plenty of resources. Go Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International. Like, you know, there's a lot of opinion pieces that are not, you're not supposed to ignore those either. You read them. I go and I read Zionist BS all the time,
because you want to see what they're seeing to feel what they're like. Exactly. Why are they feeling that?
How many times have I tried to understand why it is that they feel so justified in this push and this behavior and this defense? Right? Defense of Zionism, not self-defense in this war, right? And you know, you get into this deep rabbit hole of like cult mentalities and the us versus them, right? And you see that they use very powerful tools. And you know what? Until now, nobody has been sitting there and debunking anything because they're scared to be labeled as an anti-Semite, you know? So you don't question because you don't want to be targeted.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened a lot when you talk about social media. But it's just been so incessant this time from pro-Palestinian voices. And it's been so obvious and clear and in front of our faces every single, not even every single, like a fraction of the misery that's being inflicted on the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank. Let's not forget that people are like, okay, you know what? I need to have an opinion on this.
Yeah.
Like, this is global politics. There's hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the US. There's millions of people protesting around the world. Like, this is strong enough for people who are not Palestinian, not Arab, not affiliated at all to be speaking up. So let me make an opinion, you know? And you've been seeing that a lot, especially with Western, like American creators. And I'm really proud of them, honestly, because it's really tough when the back end of it is being labeled as a anti-Semite and a Jew hater and all these things. And you always have to have a disclaimer of, I love Jewish people. I don't have a problem with them.
Yeah.
This is not connected. And you just hope that other Jewish people who have just absorbed this propaganda, and I don't blame them. They grew up in families, they went to schools that taught them, you know, you're hated, you've always been attacked, you always have to be on the defense, you know? So on that side, like, no, I don't blame them for growing up with this mentality. But the more people come out and say, listen, I love Jewish people, it's not about that, and explain the separation between Judaism and Zionism, which is why I made that second video, then you have Jews sitting there being like, oh, it's not us versus them. It's not Jews versus the whole world. What is it then? And then they start to educate themselves, and you find so many ex-Zionists who are Jewish, and they say, I grew up with this.
I've seen those videos.
Yeah.
And I think it's really powerful what you said, where it's like, don't just listen to the pro-Palestine creators or the pro-Israel ones. Listen to everyone and do your own goddamn research and figure it out. I think that's a very powerful statement.
See the lies that they spew, see the propaganda they sell. Like, they all say the same lines. It's almost like a script.
It is like a script. I agree. And then with you saying, like, you know, the backlash is like being labeled something. I mean, I can even talk about it from the corporate end where people are getting fired, especially in like New York, like doctors. Like, I just feel like it's the first time, it's like an awakening where it's like, we like you, but to a degree. Don't overstep. Like, you know, there are certain things that you can't overstep. Like, I have influencer friends here that were saying they never really showed their Muslim pro-Palestine side. It just never came up. And now all of a sudden, it's like that's what they're posting on their stories, and they're losing followers. People don't want to see that. And so I wanted to get your perspective. Why are a lot of people hesitant to post, especially influencers? Is there, like, what's the negative backlash that you guys are seeing that maybe we don't see, and that we get super pissed off at, like celebrities and everyone? Like, why aren't you posting? Why can't you be super vocal?
That's a really good question. And I think, you know, I can't speak for everyone, obviously, and I don't have nearly as big as a platform as so many people who are in this, you know, position. But I think, you know, first of all, if they go, good riddance.
Yeah,
that's one. Two, the whole anti-Semite part. You know, you can be the most loving person in the world, and yet because of the rhetoric around speaking up against Israel being so closely and purposely tied to hating the Jewish people, it makes it very hard to come up and say something, because you do not want to be set into a box of you hate Jewish people. Like, that's just not a thing, you know? That's not among the Palestinian population. There are Christians and there are Muslims. You know, it's not if you hate Palestinians, you're Islamophobic. We never connect that rhetoric. If you hate Palestinians, you know, you're against Christians. Like, we never tie that rhetoric. We never tie it to religion. And maybe that was the weak point, right? Like,
I agree.
Maybe more people would stand up and say something if they thought it was a religious problem on our side too, and not just their side. But the thing is like, the second that this was tied to religion is where it all falls apart, you know? Like Noam Chomsky, there's a really great video of him saying, you know, who's able to claim something that happened 2,000 years ago and make it true today? Like, how can you say, you know, Judea was our homeland 2,000 years ago, so we get to have it today? That's just not the way the world works.
That's not, no.
And from a religious text of all things,
Yeah.
like who sees the, you know, legitimacy in that?
Yeah.
Like that in itself, that logic, that viewpoint that they like jumped off of is like, this is why you need to do your research and see why are they saying what they're saying? Why do they believe what they believe? Why is it tied to religion? And should it be, you know?
And with the religion thing, you're right, because a lot of the videos that are coming out or like comments, it's like, well, if you went to Gaza, they would kill you. Or if you, and it's like, firstly, like you said, Gaza is not only run with Muslims, and it's not like that's just so far from the truth, because you'd be probably killed higher chance by Israel, even if you managed to get your way into Gaza somehow.
Yeah.
But you're right, they're just constantly tying it into some negative portions that they're trying to highlight about Islam or whatever. Yeah. And just making everyone, they're attempting to make everyone against it.
This goes with the Western media rhetoric, right? Like, why, you know, when you look at the definition of, you know, terrorist groups and things, if you get into that, that's another thing you should research if you have free time. Like, if you want to go into the definition of what terrorism is, the US is guilty of it.
Versus a resistance group.
Yeah, I mean, that's another point, right? Like, if you don't start on October 7th, which you should not start on October 7th, you'll realize that, you know, Hamas is the product of an occupation. It's a product of ethnic cleansing. It's a product of something. Mm-hmm. And who's to say they would still exist if this oppression wasn't there, right? Like, oppression always breeds extremism. And funding is a whole other thing. Who's funding them, right? Who funded them from the beginning? Mm-hmm. You know, when people say it's complicated and there's so many nuances and it is complicated only for the reason that there is so much information, so many things that have happened in almost a century, right? So do your research. And it's not, you know, you shouldn't be overwhelmed. There's so many resources. If you want to know what's happening today, there's 1 million documentaries.
1 million.
If you want to know what's happening 10 years ago, 1 million documentaries. 1 million books. Yeah. Even if you want to see the way that Palestinians spoke about the idea of the Zionist state before it was introduced, there's so many great books written at the time of how it doesn't make sense and it won't solve the Jewish problem, which if you don't know what that is, you can check my video on the history of Zionism. But all the information is available. Google is free. This is what my videos are trying to remind people. Like, I pieced it together in a way that maybe, you know, feels more logical and easier to understand and consume because it's, you know, few minute video on social media. But you can go and you can read those things and make the same conclusions. I'm not more qualified than anyone else to make these conclusions. Yeah. You know, everyone should just Google, what is Zionism? There's so many videos. Like, the information is not at all hard to find.
And thank you so much for your informational videos, because like you said, it is more easier to understand. Have you gotten backlash with those videos?
It depends what you count as backlash. You know, when I have people who are spewing uninformed, you know, cult mentality kind of phrases, I don't count that. I put up, first of all, I put a lot of comment filters on TikTok. So any keywords are just like not posted there from the beginning. There's always going to be people fighting in my comments. There's always going to be, you know, some people who have their facts wrong, have all these things. You know, people come at me and they just call me uneducated, and they call me like, you know, how dare you? Yeah. And it's like, the reason for the videos that I created specifically that are informational, factual, and backed up with evidence, like right in front of your face, is like, you can't say anything to go against this. Like, you can say, oh, you're extrapolating or you're a conspiracy theorist, but all those things at the end of the day, they don't hit me. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you really saying out of that? Like, disprove me. I'm so open to it. Show me your proof. Show me your evidence. Because I did my research. And no, I don't know every single thing about every single date and every single action that's occurred on both sides. But I know enough on what I'm speaking about, you know? So that's why I encourage everyone, be educated, talk about it. And if you don't know everything, that's fine. No, like, nobody here knows every single thing that conspired.
I don't even think you need to. Like you said, no one knows. Yeah. But as a creator, you know, you've spent so much time on these platforms like TikTok, Instagram, everything. And now they're coming out and shadow banning like you or like other influencers that have just dedicated so much and built their careers on these platforms.
But you know what, like, sorry,
no, go for it.
I was going to say, like, people want this information. Like, there's something that's different now as opposed to years ago, or even 2 years ago with Sheikh Jarrah, or last year with Shireen Abu Akleh. people want this information now more than ever. They're angry, especially in the US, especially in England. They're angry and they want the truth. So they're seeking this information. Now the algorithms can't do anything about that. Like, yeah, Instagram is still banning pages and stuff, but we will overcome, you know, every single time another page comes up, every time any kind of government, any kind of company, corporate, whatever has tried to smush the will of the people, it's never worked. It's never worked. The people always find another way.
I agree.
You see people like going out in the waters in Australia, blocking shipping containers that have, you know, weapons for Israel.
Yeah.
This is what gives me so much hope. And it only happens because people are doing their own research and they're going out and they're finding things, they're researching it. TikTok said, you know, they're not pushing pro-Palestine content. People are just looking for it.
And, you know, creators are creating like, you know, filters for it. People are making songs out of it. And, you know, there's a lot of backlash with, why are you making a song and stuff? And it's like, we don't need a trending song to see a dead body, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's for you guys to understand, like, you know, for this trending bit, for you to understand that this is what's happening and we're just trying to present it to you in a way that's like easier
Consumable.
for you.
Yeah.
Consumable. Even with Bassem Youssef.
Yeah.
I watched his interview, the second one with Piers Morgan, and he literally starts out with, I'm the least qualified person to talk about this.
Yeah.
As are we. But for some reason, you know, no one wants to hear the governments anymore. Everyone wants to like hear the comedians or people talk to them in a consumable manner. Like you said, like you're creative, but you're making these incredible videos about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like at the end of the day, people, like for the first time, I feel like we're seeing like a global revolution almost against, you know, what's been permissible for decades. And it only exists because people continue to search for it. People continue to, you know, look for the information, and people continue to make videos, thankfully, in the like creator economy that we have. It's that easy. You pick up the phone and you film a video. And, you know, nothing's stopping anyone from picking up the phone and being like, can someone answer this question for me? Can someone send me resources? And you will get bombarded with resources. You know, like we are able to share so many things because of the internet, because of social media. And, you know, I think that's what's making a huge change in the governments.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't like the people that are like, oh, you never said anything before, but now. Like, yeah, but now, so what? You know, they're here.
I agree.
You
There's
know?
a lot of like, I mean, I get both sides. Both sides. But as long as like we're united. And we're still like,
Another thing is like they'll always try to put, you know, like pieces between, you know, a movement so that you become, you know, siloed. Yeah. And, you know, you don't support each other anymore. And like, oh no, but I'm more pro-Palestinian than no. How about we all just sit here and we talk and we have, you know, informed conversations, and, you know, we may not all agree on the way forwards or a solution or things like that, or maybe not even have a solution. Yeah. But we all know what's happening now is wrong. I think we can all agree on that. We need to find that baseline and just hug each other, man. Like, this is a really challenging, disgusting period in history that we're gonna have to look back on, and it's not gonna be erased. Like, we're here, it's happening.
What were we doing?
Exactly. The point is that I want to get across is do your own research, get educated, don't be afraid to speak out, even if you don't know, you know, everything on the topic. That's okay. Research one topic, say what you do know. You know, it's more than enough. Like, when people see other people coming up and speaking out, it encourages them to. And before you know it, we have this domino reaction around the world, as we're already seeing it, you know, take place. And the governments won't be able to do anything except listen, you know. They're gonna have to.
That's the whole point. That's what they were supposed to be there for, just to listen to their citizens.
When you're saying you're democratic, like, that's your only job.
Yeah, it's your one job.
Your only job.
That's
is to
why
listen to the
so
people.
Pissed off because of the tax dollars and
I'm
everything.
American, I have a passport. Like, I'm pissed off. Like, what do you mean? I'm not. What do you mean my tax dollars? No way.
No one's paying taxes this year. And
yeah,
it's coming in January.
Yeah, like, really. I mean, but that's a possibility, and that's the point of the democratic system, is that you're supposed to be able to, you know, vote with your dollar, and you're supposed to also be listened to by your representatives, and that's not happening. I mean, you know, 10% of them, right? Only 10% are like actually listening to their constituents. But yeah, it's crazy, but the people always win. The people always win. So
with that being said, we're short on time.
Yeah. Sorry, I got passionate there.
No, as are both of us, and maybe we can do a second episode. But thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.